The night was too quiet for a small southern town. Crickets hummed in the dark, and the moon lit the gravel road leading past a forgotten barn. That's when Marcus Hayes noticed the pickup trucks. Their headlights cut through the trees like hunting lamps. Engines rumbled low, steady, circling him in the night. Marcus was used to tension. He'd survived firefights overseas, stood in deserts where silence meant danger, and led men through chaos as a Delta Force commander. But tonight, he wasn't in uniform. He wasn't carrying a rifle. He was just a black man driving home, after visiting his mother. And these men, the ones stepping out of the trucks, shotguns and baseball bats in hand, didn't know who he really was. "Boy," one of them called, spitting into the dirt, "you're on the wrong road tonight." The group wasn't just a handful of locals. They were part of an old hate that refused to die. A racist clan that thrived on fear, on keeping their grip over a county too scared to challenge them. They thought Marcus was just another victim to chase, humiliate, maybe worse. What they didn't realize was that they had cornered the wrong man. Beneath Marcus's calm stare was training sharper than any weapon they carried. And as their circle tightened, something in his eyes warned that this night would not end the way they expected. The gravel crunched under Marcus Hayes's boots as he stood in the pale glow of truck headlights, the only man on a lonely stretch of road. The night was still except for the faint buzz of cicadas. Above, a half moon hung like a watchful eye, silvering the cornfields that swayed on either side, but the quiet was a lie. Engines idled in a circle around him, growling low, breathing smoke into the air. 4 pickup trucks, all dented and patched with rust, boxed him in like wolves closing on prey. Their lights cut harsh beams into his face, erasing the stars and making his shadow stretch long across the dirt. The men who stepped out of those trucks carried themselves with the ugly confidence of people who believed the night belonged to them. 6 in total. Faces shadowed under baseball caps and hoodies, skin tanned from outdoor labor, eyes hard with years of resentment. Each held something: a shotgun, a length of chain, a tire iron, a baseball bat. Their movements weren't disciplined, but there was a purpose in the way they spread out. Marcus had seen this kind of movement before. Not from men in uniforms, but from insurgent mobs overseas. Crowds whipped into violence by hate and rumor. The same body language, the same fire in the eyes, the same reckless hunger for domination. He exhaled slowly through his nose. Calm, still, his heart rate hadn't climbed. Combat training had burned panic out of him long ago. But every muscle under his plain jacket was alert, coiled, ready. The leader approached. He was big, broad-shouldered, belly pressing against his shirt, the kind of man who leaned on bulk and intimidation. A Confederate flag patch clung proudly to his vest. He smacked a wooden bat against his palm as he swaggered forward, every step meant to remind Marcus of where he was, their territory. "You lost, boy?" the man drawled, his voice rough, dripping with mockery. "Road don't go where you think it goes." Marcus said nothing. He'd learned in interrogation school that silence had weight. It unsettled men who thrived on reaction, men who fed on fear. But here, his silence was read as weakness. A ripple of ugly laughter came from the others. One of them, wary, twitchy, the kind who wanted to prove himself, spat onto the dirt. "Look at him. Standing there like he's too good for us. Maybe we should break that pride." Another man shifted the shotgun in his hands, letting the metallic click echo into the night. "Could teach him real fast?" Marcus's eyes tracked every movement without turning his head. 6 men. 2 firearms. Close range. Poor spacing. Their boots slipped in gravel, their grips were sloppy, their nerves disguised by bravado. He could dismantle them in seconds. But that wasn't the point, because Marcus wasn't just calculating survival. He was calculating consequences. If he crushed them here, word would spread. Not of justice, but of retaliation. The sheriff, a friend of theirs no doubt, would twist the story. Neighbors would whisper. And the hate would grow hotter. If he hesitated too long, though, their violence could spill further. They'd find another target. Someone without his training. Someone who couldn't fight back. The leader stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell the sour beer on his breath. He raised his bat, stopping just short of Marcus's shoulder in a mock swing. Scared yet? Marcus didn't flinch, didn't blink. That hesitation, that lack of reaction, unsettled the man more than a fist to the jaw. The leader's grin faltered for a split second before he barked a laugh to cover it. Tough guy, huh? You think you're safe out here? Marcus finally spoke, his voice low, steady, the kind of voice that cut through chaos. You sure you want to do this? The words landed like stones in still water. The wiry man with the chain laughed too loud, covering his nerves. Oh, he thinks he's in charge! That's funny. Real funny. But the calm in Marcus's tone wasn't bravado. It wasn't threat. It was control. And for men who lived off dominance, control coming from their target was like a slap. For a heartbeat, the group hesitated. It was subtle. A shuffle of boots, a glance exchanged. But hesitation spreads like fire in dry grass. The leader saw it, and fury flared in his face. He needed to restore control. He needed to remind his men why they followed him. He swung the bat again, this time with full intent, aiming to crack bone. Marcus shifted just an inch, letting the bat whistle past his shoulder. The motion was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment it looked like the swing had missed on its own. The leader stumbled, caught off guard. Marcus's stance changed, barely. A tilt of the head, a set of the shoulders. Small movements, but they carried some the others felt in their bones readiness. It froze them. And then, the air broke. The man with the shotgun raised it higher, barking, "Don't just stand there! Do it!" The group surged closer, shouting slurs, spitting into the dirt. The circle tightened, weapons rising. Marcus's breathing slowed. He was back in the desert now, back in alleys where every shadow held a trigger. His mind mapped the ground distances, angles, trajectories. 2 seconds to disarm the shotgun. 3 more to neutralize the chain and bat. 6 seconds to control the field. But something else pulled at him. A memory. His mother's voice earlier that evening, standing on her porch warning him. Marcus, this county hasn't changed. Don't stay too long on these roads after dark. He'd promised her he'd be careful. And here he was. The leader roared and lunged again. Marcus didn't strike back. Not yet. He stepped back instead, drawing them further into their own trap. He measured them, letting their rage blind them, letting their formation collapse. Each insult they spat, each shove they threw, made them more reckless. He could sense it now. This wasn't about him, not really. This was about performance. These men wanted to remind each other, and themselves, that their hate still held power in the night. But Marcus was about to show them what true power looked like. His jaw tightened. His hands curled, not in fear, but in preparation. The night thickened, pressing in around them. A truck idled louder, exhaust clouds hanging like smoke from a battlefield. This wasn't just escalation anymore. This was the line before the storm. And when it broke, nothing in this county would ever be the same again. The night after the roadside standoff, silence blanketed the county like a heavy fog. From the outside, the town of Ashwood looked calm, its single stoplight blinking red, diners closing, the hum of crickets filling the air. But beneath that surface, the racist clan gathered, furious, humiliated, and hungry for vengeance. Inside a dimly lit barn on the outskirts of town, the trucks from the night before were parked haphazardly in the dirt. Lanterns swayed from the rafters, throwing shadows that danced across rough wooden walls, covered with old flags, hunting trophies, and a shrine of hate symbols that had been passed down through generations. The men crowded around a scarred table, their voices sharp and raw. He just stood there. The wary man with the chain said, pacing, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. Didn't flinch. Didn't beg. Like he knew something we didn't? The leader, Clay Maddox, slammed his bat onto the table, making the lanterns tremble. I don't care what he knew. He made fools out of us. In front of our own? A silence followed? In their world, humiliation was dangerous. Respect wasn't earned by kindness. It was built on fear, intimidation, control. And Marcus Hayes's refusal to bow had cracked that foundation. "He's military," one of them muttered. "The way he stood, the way he moved. That ain't no regular man." Clay's eyes narrowed. "So what if he is? This is our county. Our rules. Outsiders don't get to walk in and make us look weak." Another man, older, leaned forward, voice lower but laced with venom. "You know what folks'll say if word gets out? That Clay Maddox let some black man stare him down. That's the end of you." The words hit their mark. Clay wasn't just a thug with a bat, he was a man who fed off reputation. Without fear, his grip on the clan would weaken. And without the clan, his influence in Ashwood would vanish. Clay tightened his grip on the bat until his knuckles went white. "Then we fix it. We don't just scare him. We end him. And we make an example out of him so Runny forgets who runs these roads." The wary man stopped pacing. His chain clinked as he spoke, nervous but eager. "You mean kill him?" Clay leaned in, eyes cold. "We've done worse. You think the sheriff don't know? He's one of us. Always has been. As long as we clean it up, there won't be a trace." The others exchanged looks. Some were hesitant but none dared speak against Clay. In this circle, disagreement wasn't debate, it was betrayal. Clay laid out his plan. First, surveillance. They'd find out everything about Marcus, where he lived, who he visited, when he was alone. They'd watch him for days, weeks if needed. Second, intimidation. If killing him outright seemed too risky, they'd go after his family, his mother, his friends, tightening the noose until Marcus either left town or broke under pressure. And third, if all else failed, they'd stage an accident. A hunting trip gone wrong, a roadside robbery, a car fire. The county coroner was a cousin. The sheriff, an ally. The cover up would be simple. As Clay spoke, the men leaned in, their faces lit with the glow of lantern light. They weren't just drunk on hate. They were drunk on the feeling of control. But what none of them realized was that Marcus Hayes was already watching them. Earlier that day, Marcus had driven to town under the guise of running errands. But his instincts told him something was brewing. He parked near the diner, drank coffee slowly and listened. Veterans didn't survive by chance, they survived by reading currents others ignored. And the current in Ashwood was shifting. He caught the stares. He felt the silence when he walked in. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People whispered, eyes darting toward him then away. It wasn't just hostility, it was fear. Fear of what Clay Maddox and his men might do next. Marcus paid his bill, thanked the waitress, and left without showing a suspicion. But every step he took was measured. Every car mirror reflected his keen eyes scanning for tails. By the time the clan was whispering in their barn, Marcus was already a mile away, standing on a ridge with binoculars, watching the trucks gather. He didn't need to hear their words, their body language told the story. He'd seen enough councils of war to recognize one. And in his mind, gears turned. They think they're hunting me, but I'm already inside their hunt. Back in the barn, Clay Maddox slammed his bat down again, finalizing his orders. "We start tonight? Spread out, watch his house. Watch the roads. He won't see us coming. And when we're ready, we'll make sure this county remembers who's in charge." The men grunted their approval. Boots scraped against the floorboards as they filed out, fire in their eyes, chains and guns in their hands. They believed they held the upper hand. They believed their network, their sheriff, their cousins, their decades of terror, made them untouchable. But in the shadows of the ridge, Marcus lowered his binoculars, the corner of his mouth curling into something between resolve and warning. If they wanted war, they had chosen the wrong battlefield. Because Marcus Hayes didn't just defend himself, he dismantled enemies from the inside out, and Clay Maddox's clan was about to learn that the man they thought was prey was in fact the hunter. The next morning, Ashwood looked unchanged. Sunlight painted the diner windows, the gas station sign flickered, and old men rocked on porches as if time had stood still. But under the surface, the air was charged. The clan thought they were tightening their grip. What they didn't know was that Marcus Hayes had already decided, the hunt ends today. Marcus began with the same tactic they planned to use on him: surveillance. Only his methods were sharper, cleaner, and invisible. He parked his truck 2 streets over from his mother's house and moved on foot, blending into the tree lines like a shadow. He watched as 2 of Clay's men sat in their own pickup down the road, pretending to read a paper while keeping their eyes fixed on the front door. Amateurs. Their shoulders were stiff, their habits predictable. Marcus noted their license plate numbers, the make of their truck, even the way the younger one tapped his boot nervously against the floorboard. He recorded everything in his mind. By midday, he had counted 6 different watchers, rotating in and out of positions. They thought they were predators circling. In truth, Marcus was the one mapping their entire net. At nightfall, he slipped into motion. No camouflage paint, no military kit, just the quiet stealth of a man who had spent years slipping behind enemy lines. He tailed them one by one, noting their routines. The wiry man with the chain always bought beer at the same corner store. The shotgun carrier lived in a trailer, with a barking hound that could barely walk. Clay himself drove the same route to the sheriff's office every Thursday. Every detail mattered, because Marcus wasn't planning to fight them head-on. He was going to expose them. But exposure required proof, and proof required allies. Marcus sat in his truck, flipping through an old leather wallet. Inside was a card, faded from years of wear. It bore a name and number he hadn't used in a long time: Special Agent Ramirez, FBI Field Office. Ramirez had served with Marcus overseas once, a liaison during joint missions. Marcus remembered him as sharp, relentless, and committed to rooting out corruption stateside. Marcus dialed. The phone rang twice as answered, clipped but cautious. Ramirez. "It's Hayes," Marcus said quietly. A pause. Then, "Damn. I thought you disappeared. What's going on?" "I've got a problem. Racist clan in Ashwood. Sheriff's in their pocket. They tried to corner me last night. They're planning more." Another silence, this one heavier. "You sure?" "I've got eyes on them. They're sloppy but connected. If we let this ride, someone's going to end up dead? Maybe a lot of someones?" Ramirez sighed. "We've had whispers about Ashwood for years. Problem's always been evidence. You saying you can get it?" Marcus looked out at the trucks parked down the street, engines idling like wolves waiting for the Alpha's call. His jaw set. "I can get it. But I'll need backup when the time comes." "You've got it," Ramirez said. "But don't do anything crazy?" Marcus ended the call without answering. He wasn't planning on crazy. He was planning on decisive. That night, Marcus set his counterattack into motion. He drove deliberately down one of Ashwood's back roads, the kind the clan loved to haunt. He let his headlights flicker, pretending his truck had mechanical trouble. Then he pulled over and popped the hood. He didn't need to wait long. Within minutes, Clay's men appeared, 2 trucks' engines growling. They slowed, circling him, grins flashing in the dark. "Truck trouble, boy," one called, laughter spilling into the night. Marcus didn't answer. He just stood, hands on the hood, back turned slightly toward them. An easy target. Vulnerable. The men grew bolder, stepping out with their weapons. The wary one twirled his chain. "Where's that tough act now?" Marcus let them close in. 10 feet. 8 feet. Their confidence grew with every step. Then, from inside his jacket, Marcus clicked a button on a small device. The faintest green light blinked. The moment the men stepped in the headlight's glow, Marcus moved. Not with violence, not yet. He simply turned his body so that the small camera clipped under his collar caught every second. Their faces. Their weapons. Their words. "Sheriff ain't gonna save you tonight," the wary one taunted, raising his chain. Marcus spoke, voice calm, steady. "Everything you say, everything you do right now, is being recorded. Think real hard about your next move. The men froze. Confusion flashed first, then panic. You're bluffing? One spat. Marcus's mouth curled. Am I? The wary one hesitated, then swore and backed away. But the other, red-faced and stubborn, raised his bat. Marcus stepped forward, catching his wrist in one swift motion and twisting until the man yelped. The bat clattered to the ground. Marcus leaned in close, voice just above a whisper. Tell Clay Maddox I'm done playing defense. He wants me gone? He's going to have to face me himself. He shoved the man back, letting him stumble into the dust. Then he picked up the bat and tossed it into the ditch like garbage. The trucks roared off minutes later, engines loud but spirits shaken. By dawn, whispers were already spreading through Ashwood. The clan's men weren't invincible. The stranger they thought they could break had turned the tables. At the diner, locals spoke in hushed tones. Some were afraid. Others, secretly, felt a spark of hope. If Marcus could stand up to Clay Maddox, maybe someone else could too. And in the barn, Clay seized. His men stammered out excuses, talking over one another, their story tangled. He had a camera, the wary one said. Recording everything. He said he'd take it to the feds. Clay's face twisted red. And you let him walk? The man flinched. What were we supposed to do? Kill him on tape? Clay slammed his fist into the table, splintering the wood. You idiots. Don't you see? He's baiting us. He wants us to overstep. He wants to drag outsiders in. His men shifted uneasily. Doubt lingered in their eyes now. Marcus's calm had done more damage than fists ever could. That night, Marcus sat at his mother's kitchen table, the old wood scarred by decades of meals and family arguments. She sat across from him, worry in her eyes. You can't keep doing this, Marcus, she said softly. These men aren't just bullies. They're dangerous. They've been running this county since before you were born. Marcus looked down at his hands, the same hands that had carried rifles in deserts and jungles, the same hands that had lifted brothers in arms out of firefights. That's exactly why I can't stop, Mama. They've been running it too long. Her voice trembled. They'll come for you. For me. He reached across the table, resting his hand over hers. Not if I end it first. Outside, in the quiet dark of Ashwood, Clay Maddox was already sharpening his next move. But Marcus Hayes was no longer the hunted. He was the storm coming for the clan. And when he struck, there would be no doubt left in Ashwood about who really held power. The storm rolled in without rain. Thick clouds pressed against the night sky, muting the stars, turning Ashwood darker than usual. Marcus sat in his truck on the outskirts of town, the dashboard clock glowing past midnight. He could feel it. Tonight would not be like the others. Tonight, Clay Maddox would stop hiding behind shadows. He'd come for Marcus directly. For days the tension had mounted like a bowstring stretched to breaking. Every step Marcus took through Ashwood, eyes followed him. Some held curiosity, some admiration, but most carried fear. The diner fell silent when he walked in. The gas station clerk whispered as she rang up his coffee. He wasn't just the man standing up to the clan now. He was the man forcing the entire town to choose silence or courage. Clay had noticed. Marcus knew it from the way his watchers vanished. Trucks that had once circled like buzzards suddenly pulled back. No more intimidation, no more warnings. That was Clay's style. Pull back the pressure, lull the prey, and then strike hard when least expected. Marcus had seen warlords try the same strategy overseas. It always meant the ambush was already in motion. So Marcus waited, patient as stone, mind sharp. He replayed his plan, his calls with Ramirez, the recordings hidden in 3 separate locations. If he didn't make it through tonight, the FBI would still have enough to burn Ashwood's corruption to the ground. But survival wasn't just about proof. Survival meant living long enough to see Clay Maddox's empire crumble. The ambush came on a road Marcus knew too well, one lined with skeletal trees that cast shadows like prison bars. He was halfway home from checking on his mother when his headlights picked up movement ahead. A truck parked sideways across the road, blocking the lane. Another slid in behind him, boxing him in. Their engines idled low, a growl that rumbled in Marcus's chest. He cut the ignition and silence for 3 beats, listening. Boots hit gravel. Doors slammed. At least 8 men, maybe more. He opened his door slowly, stepping out into the night, his breath fogged in the cool air. Clay Maddox stepped forward, flanked by his men. The firelight from a lantern in one man's hand carved his features into something almost monstrous. Jaw clenched, eyes wild, skin flushed with fury. He carried no weapon Marcus could see, but his men were bristling with them. Shotguns, bats, chains. Well, Clay drawled, voice thick with venom. The war hero himself. Thought you could make a fool out of me. Thought you could humiliate my men. You don't know who you're dealing with? Marcus didn't move. His voice, when it came, was calm as a blade. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who hides behind numbers. A bully who thinks fear is power. But fear's got an expiration date, Clay. Yours is up. The men shifted, uncomfortable at the words. Marcus's tone carried something different, something that unsettled them more than the sight of any weapon. Clay snarled, but he heard it too. You don't run this town? Clay snapped. I do. My family's been running it for generations. And no outsider, especially not some washed-up soldier, is gonna change that. Marcus took a step forward, closing the distance. His eyes swept the group, memorizing positions, spacing weapons. His military mind calculated possibilities in a fraction of a second. He could disarm the man with the shotgun first, use it to scatter the others, turn the lantern against them to blind in the dark. But he held still. Violence wasn't his goal. Breaking Clay's illusion of control was. You think they respect you? Marcus said, voice rising just enough for all to hear. Look at them. They're here because they're afraid of you. Afraid of what happens if they say no. But fear won't carry you through tonight. Not against me. For a heartbeat. Silence. Then Clay laughed, sharp and ugly. You really believe that, don't you? That you're some savior. Let me teach you something. In Ashwood, saviors don't survive. He gestured. 2 men lunged forward, chain and bat raised. Marcus moved like water, sidestepping, striking nerve points, dropping both in seconds without breaking stride. The others staggered back, eyes wide. Clay's smirk faltered. The tension snapped. Shouts erupted. More men surged forward, but Marcus was ready. He caught the chain, yanked its wielder off balance, used him as a shield against a swing from the bat. Fists cracked into jaws, knees buckled, bodies fell. He fought with precision, every strike measured, disabling instead of killing. It wasn't about blood, it was about sending a message: I cannot be broken. But numbers pressed hard. Hands clawed at him, boots kicked. He was forced back against his truck, chest heaving, sweat glistening. One man raised a shotgun, finger trembling on the trigger. And then headlights blazed down the road. Engines roared. Another set of trucks stormed in, but these weren't Clay's. They were unmarked, government issued. Doors flew open, an armed agent spilled out, FBI jackets flashing in the lantern light. Ramirez himself led the charge, voice booming. Federal agents, drop your weapons, chaos erupted. Clay's men froze, torn between fight and flight. Some dropped their weapons instantly. Others bolted into the woods. The shotgun clattered to the ground. In the confusion, Marcus stood tall, chest rising with steady breaths. Clay's eyes darted, wild, desperate. The plan had slipped through his fingers. He lunged for Marcus, fury overriding reason. But before he could strike, Ramirez was there, gun drawn. Don't, Ramirez warned. Clay stopped, chest heaving. His men were being cuffed, shoved against trucks, their empire crawling in the blink of an eye. But Clay's glare never left Marcus. This ain't over, he hissed, spittle flying. You think the feds scare me? You think you scare me? You're just one man. One man can't change a whole town? Marcus stepped closer, his voice low but sharp as steel. I don't need to change the whole town, Clay. Just enough of it to bury you. For a moment, the world held still. Rain threatened in the clouds above. The air trembled with the weight of unfinished war. Clay's words hung heavy, Marcus's reply sharper still. The agents tightened their grip, but even as Clay was dragged back, his eyes locked on Marcus with a promise of vengeance. The storm hadn't broken yet. This was only the pause before thunder. The morning after the raid, Ashwood woke up to a different kind of silence. Not the ordinary hush of a small town before sunrise, but the heavy, uncertain quiet that follows an earthquake. Trucks that once circled with menace were parked in driveways, their owners absent or locked in federal custody. The diner was half empty, whispers running across the counter like static. Nobody looked at Marcus directly, but everyone knew he had been there when the storm hit. Everyone knew he had stood in the center of it. Clay Maddox was gone for now. Hauled off by the FBI, his wrists cuffed, his shouts echoing in the night like a warning. But Marcus had been around long enough to understand that prisons didn't always hold men like Clay. Connections, money, favors, these things made cages weaker than they looked. And when Clay came back, he would come back harder, more desperate, more dangerous. Marcus sat at his mother's kitchen table again, the same spot where he had promised her he'd end this. She poured coffee into 2 chipped mugs, her hands steady though her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. "You should leave, Marcus," she said softly. "The FBI's here now. Let them handle it. This isn't your fight anymore." He sipped the coffee, bitter and grounding. "It was never just my fight. It's the town's. It's yours. Every person Clay's silenced, every family he's terrorized. If I walk away now, he wins, even from a cell." She studied him, worry etched into the lines of her face. "And if you stay, what happens when he comes back?" Marcus didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because the truth was heavier than words. If Clay returned, there would be blood. By midday, Ramirez visited. He leaned against the doorframe. His suit rumpled from a night without sleep. "Your recordings helped nail half his crew. We've got them on federal charges, hate crimes, conspiracy, illegal weapons. But Maddox himself, he's slipperier. He's already got lawyers making calls." Marcus expected as much. "Then we need more. Something that ties him directly. Something they can't shake." Ramirez nodded reluctantly. "I'll do what I can. But Hayes, you need to be careful. Men like him don't forgive, they don't forget." That night, Marcus drove through Ashwood again. Without the clan's trucks shadowing him, the roads felt eerily empty. But emptiness can be its own kind of trap. He slowed near the old barn, the one where Clay often gathered his men. The doors were chained shut, but Marcus's gut told him it wouldn't stay that way for long. Hate doesn't die in chains. It festers, waiting for the chance to break free, and then it came. 2 nights later, a fire. Sirens wailed, painting the sky red as the church on Main Street burned. People gathered in the street, faces pale with fear. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. The fire wasn't random. It was a message. Clay Maddox's reach still stretched beyond prison walls. Marcus stood among the crowd, the heat licking his skin, watching the flames devour the steeple. Beside him, a little boy clutched his mother's hand and whispered, "Why would someone do this?" The mother pulled him close, unable to answer. Marcus's jaw tightened. This was Clay's counterpunch. He couldn't fight Marcus head-on, so he struck the heart of the community instead. A sacred place, a symbol of unity. Clay was saying, "I'm still here. You can't stop me." Next morning, Ramirez confirmed it. Maddox is orchestrating from the inside. He's got loyalists still free. Unless we cut off his influence, this'll spiral. Marcus leaned back in his chair, mind racing. Then it's not enough to expose him. We need to break his grip on this town completely. Ramirez studied him. That's not something the FBI can do. That's something the people of Ashwood have to decide for themselves. Those words stuck with Marcus. Decide for themselves. For years, the people had chosen silence out of fear, but fear was just another weapon, and weapons could be taken away. So Marcus went to work. He spoke to the pastor whose church had been burned, to the diner owner whose windows had been smashed, to the mechanic whose son had been beaten by Clay's men last year. He told them what he had seen overseas, how villages under warlords learned to rise when they realized they had more power together than apart. At first, they were hesitant. Eyes dropped to the floor, voices barely above whispers. But little by little, something shifted. A flicker of courage in one man's stare, a nod from a woman tired of living in fear. The cracks in Clay's empire weren't just from federal charges. They were from the town itself starting to wake up. And then came the meeting. In the old community hall, lit by bare bulbs and filled with the hum of nervous voices, Marcus stood before them. Farmers, shopkeepers, young and old alike, people who lived too long under a shadow. "I'm not here to save Ashwood," he said plainly. "I'm here to remind you that you can save yourselves. Clay Maddox only has power because you gave it to him. Because he made you afraid. But look around. There are more of you than there ever were of him. And now the feds are watching. He can't touch you the way he used to. Not unless you let him." The room fell quiet. He could feel their doubt, their fear, but also something else. Something rising. A woman in the back stood up. "If we speak out, he'll come for us?" Marcus met her eyes. "He already has. Every day you live in silence, he's already won. The only question is, how much longer do you want to live like this?" The words sank deep. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone clapped. Then another. Slowly, the hall filled with the sound of voices agreeing, people realizing they weren't alone. The tide was turning. But Clay Maddox wasn't done. Not yet. 3 days later, Marcus received the message. A note slipped under his mother's door. Written in jagged scrawl, "You can't protect them all." That night, Marcus barely slept. He sat in the living room, lights off, pistol resting on the table. His training told him the confrontation was coming. And when it came, it wouldn't be subtle. Just before dawn, gunfire cracked in the distance. Marcus bolted upright, heart pounding. Another attack, this time on the home of a man who had spoken at the meeting. Bullets riddled the siding, windows shattered, but by some miracle, the family escaped unharmed. Marcus arrived minutes later, his truck crunching over broken glass. The man's children huddled in blankets, wide-eyed with terror. Their father's hands shook as he tried to explain. "They said we should have stayed quiet," he whispered. "They said the next time, they won't miss." Marcus crouched, steadying the man's trembling hands. "Then the next time, we'll be ready." He looked out over the broken home, the flashing lights of Ramirez's agents arriving, the faces of neighbors gathering. And he knew the battle for Ashwood was no longer just between him and Clay Maddox. It was between the town and its fear. The question was no longer if Clay would strike again. It was when. And whether Ashwood would stand or fall depended on every person who had once looked away. Marcus turned to the people gathered, his voice carrying over the night air. "Clay Maddox thinks he owns this town. He thinks he can scare you back into silence. But the truth is, his power ends the moment you decide it does. He can't kill all of you. He can't burn every house. He can't silence every voice. But he's betting that your fear will do the job for him. So I'll ask you now, what would you do in this situation? Stay silent, hoping he passes you by? Or stand together and make sure he never comes back?" The crowd stood in tense silence, the question hanging heavy in the air. And somewhere in the distance, as if mocking the choice, thunder rumbled. Ashwood would never forget those nights. The headlights on back roads, the fire that devoured the church, the gunshots that split the silence. But more than that, they would remember the moment fear cracked. The moment one man's refusal to bow reminded an entire town that silence is also a choice. Marcus Hayes didn't see himself as a savior. He was a soldier, a son, a man who had carried too many battles on his shoulders. But in Ashwood, his presence forced a question no one could ignore. Do you keep living under the shadow of hate? Or do you risk everything to step into the light? Clay Maddox's name might fade or linger, his threats might echo from behind prison walls, but the real battle was never just about him. It was about the system that let men like him thrive, about the neighbors who chose silence, about the courage it takes to say enough. And that question doesn't belong only to Ashwood. It belongs to every town, every street, every community where fear tries to rule. What do you do when hate knocks at your door? Do you let it in, or do you stand together and shut it out? Because in the end, racism isn't defeated by one man or one fight. It's defeated when ordinary people decide to rise, and when silence finally gives way to courage.